Hello and welcome back to the Hats We Wear. Today I am honored to have Suhaiba Neill with me. She's going to talk about the hats she wears, the joys and struggles of those hats, and how she's overcome them. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So tell me about what hat you're wearing right now.
Oh, okay. So I am a single mom. I have been for 16 years now. My daughter is a sophomore in college, so we
Okay.
survived all of the toddler and mostly teenage years.
There you go.
Um, and yeah, she's out of the house and away at school, although home quite a bit still. So she's only about 45 minutes from home, which is nice.
Good.
Um, I am also the manager of a family business. So my father started a residential painting company 49 years ago in the suburbs of Philadelphia. I've been around for 19 years now, and manage the business. I tease that I get to do all the fun things nobody else wants to do
Mhm.
behind the scenes.
Mhm.
I launched my own consulting business actually in 2020 of all years. I was supposed to officially launch in March of 2020, believe it or not. And
Really?
I kind of hit pause for a second there
Mhm.
and we decided to go for it anyway. And so I launched in July. I'm like, you know what? It is what it is.
Yeah.
There's never such thing as a good time for anything. Everybody's going to be home anyway. So I had a plan and I just stuck with it. So I'm in year 4 um, in my consulting business. And in that, I actually help other contractors mostly with systems and processes. So one of the things I learned over my years with our business as we grew and got kind of more employees and more work and things got a little bit chaotic in the service-based world. If you're doing a trade, I tease that most guys and gals do that because they're good at it and not because they want to be business owners and business people. So the systems and processes required to grow and scale a business can be a little bit daunting sometimes. So I established a lot of them for our business, and then with some friends in the industry and association I'm a part of, they're like, you have to share that with the rest of the world. So that's where the consulting came in. So that's really focused on organization, productivity, and like I said, just having systems and processes in place to streamline and make sure that the experience for the customer is consistent across the board and kind of repeatable. And what other hat do I wear? I'm an only daughter. So I have 3 brothers, and so my parents are getting a little bit older, a little bit more work there with regards to kind of helping out with things here and there. And we tease it like I have another friend who's the only girl, and it's not for the faint of heart to be the only girl with all brothers. But no, we have a really close knit, tight family. So 3 brothers, we're all still in this area with probably 5-10 minutes from each other.
Nice.
So we see each other quite a bit. And one of my brothers is in the business with my father and I as well. And my final hat is, as of yesterday, I'm officially going to be a published author. So I wrote my first book, as you can see. Well, you'll see on the snippets. For those of you who can't see, if you're listening, I have a bookshelf behind me that's filled to the brim. I actually ran out of space in this room
I love it.
for books. So it's called Like a Girl. It goes along with being the only girl. Grew up in a male dominated household. I've worked in all male dominated industries in my entire career. Started with men's basketball at college level. Then I went to the NBA and worked for the Sixers, which was kind of my dream job actually as a Philly
Wow.
girl. Yeah, we're big on our sports. And then, like I said, residential painting, which is still very male dominated, although it's shifting. And I am actually very excited because I'm giving my opening talk on the book to Women in Paint group. So it's the inaugural conference for specifically women in the industry. There will be no men
Really?
in the room.
Huh.
So that's exciting to have it kind of come full circle. So lots of hats.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Women in
Yes.
painting. That's interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
I would not think there were a lot of women in residential painting.
There weren't when I started.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting much better, which is
Good.
nice to see, both in terms of ownership and also field employees that are actually literally putting on the paint. So I have a friend who owns a
Great.
business who only hires women and they only do interior work and they work between school hours. So if you have kids, you can drop them off, go to work, and then be done by the time you need to pick them up. And another friend actually who has all female crew, and he said they're better than all of his crews. So yeah, it is starting to shift, thankfully. And there's definitely an openness to it as well. Like I said, the industry association that I'm part of, is, sponsoring and supporting this new initiative to kind of get us all together and, no offense, but leave the boys out and let us kind of have our own
Yeah.
space.
And you know
So,
what? It's interesting that you mentioned that. My husband owns his own business. He's a contractor.
okay.
And I'm thinking about the guys that he has no females in the field. They're
Yeah.
all in the office. They're like in managerial positions though, because they go to the job sites and make sure everything's being done.
Right.
But I'm thinking those manual labor jobs, the painting and the carpenters and plumbers, and it's just a male dominated field that
Yeah.
you just do not see a lot of females that are part of. So I love that you are bringing together um female power in that way.
Yeah.
That's
And I think what's interesting for me, because like I said, with my background and everything, I used to be the only woman in the room, and I tease I used to be the youngest in the room. I'm not anymore, which
Mhm.
is like good and scary at the same time, how fast
Yeah.
time flies. It never
Yeah.
bothered me. And like even last week, I was at my networking meeting. I'm in a group called Vistage, and I'm the only girl again. So there was another woman who's in the group, and then her company switched out um, members. And so now I'm back to being the only woman in the room. And most of the time it doesn't phase me just because I'm so used to it. But I think in the workforce, and especially in the trades, like you said, being the first can be tough.
Yeah.
So we've had some female painters at our business over the years, but if you don't have kind of two or three, it can be really difficult to be the only one. And I think there's a huge issue right now in the trades with hiring and training and having enough people. So I'm hoping, and I think what I've seen so far is they're gearing it towards everyone. So it used to be like, we're looking for guys, we're looking for guys. Now it's like, we're looking for somebody who wants to learn a skill and wants to, have a skill set and learn a trade and become like a craft that you can use forever, take with you, it will never kind of be, we tease it, you can't really outsource painting.
Exactly, and it's
Yeah.
always going to be needed. So
Yeah.
the
So
trades, plumbers, all the electricians, all the trades are so vital because they're always going to be needed. There's always going to be houses built,
yeah.
buildings, businesses. I mean, no matter what you guys only do residential, but I mean the it's limitless really where you can go. How did you get into did you go to college for business and marketing, or did you just fall into it
Mm.
and learned it the hard way?
Not at all. I tease too. And it's funny because it's part of another podcast that I'm going to do next week about leadership and women. And so I tease now. I was actually a biology major in college.
Me too.
So I
Mhm.
was pre-vet originally.
Okay.
And I tease that I changed my mind, but not my major junior year. So I'm like, I've taken all this bio and all this chem. I'm just going to finish it. So my undergrad degree is in biology. And I managed the men's basketball team in college as well. So I was an athlete growing up and then kind of ruined my knees and decided it wasn't worth playing 4 more years of college basketball because I was definitely not making it to the WNBA. So I managed the men's team instead. And I teased I came home from school in I did one extra semester, came home in December and was kind of hanging out and with my mom who had just retired. And I'm like, yeah, this isn't going to work. I need a job. Otherwise, I'm going to never go to work, and realized I miss basketball the most. So I worked for the Sixers for 5 seasons, which was phenomenal. Then I had my daughter, and that kind of changed everything with regards to nights and weekends and, very long season. Joined the family painting business at a time when wasn't the plan, but my dad's then office manager decided to retire. So I thought I was going to come in at the bottom and learn my way up from, the beginning. And it was like, no, we're going to throw you right in the deep end. And here you go. So she did a great job, though, of teaching me the basics of what I needed to know. And then this is something, too, I tell people all the time is we have a few consultants that we work with that I tease like I got my MBA from a good friend who's a financial consultant of ours and a CPA by trade who now works specifically with painting contractors on finances. So a lot of work with her, a lot of webinars and conferences in those first kind of 4 or 5 years to learn everything I needed to learn. I also, though, you tease both of my parents were teachers. So I'm like the eternal student. So if there's
Yeah.
something new that I have to do that I've never done before, I'm going to reach out to somebody that's already done it. I'm going to take a class. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to watch a video. And now I think with the internet, it's so much easier
Mhm.
to get access. So my daughter asked me the other day, she's like, how did you look stuff up when you didn't have Google? I'm like, it's called an encyclopedia. They're on the shelf
So
in,
the, so
in my office. You can go
the
pull a
library.
book. Like,
Exactly.
he's like, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know how you survive without Google, Mom. I'm like, well, you like, yeah, you like you said, you went to the library, you grabbed your encyclopedia off the shelf and, flipped through there, got some resources. So I'm like that sponge where, I'm always learning and paying attention. Um,
You know
and
what I think though
asking.
too? You know what's striking me with your daughter asking you that question? I think we learned perseverance and patience because nothing was quick. We couldn't just flip our phone on and find an answer. We had to drive somewhere. If we didn't have an encyclopedia or resources at our home, we had to go to a library. We had to go to the card catalog, find what we were looking for, find the information. And it
Right.
just taught us a sense of perseverance and patience that kids just don't have today. And I think that probably served you well learning something on the job
For
because you
sure.
knew how to find information, you knew how to figure things out.
Yeah, and I tease too that when I was in college and like taking all these bio classes, I'm thinking, I think, when is this actually going to stick in my brain? So there's something for like classroom learning, and there's something that's very different about learning on the job and actual experience in the doing it. And making mistakes and figuring out how to correct them. And the thing that I've gotten really good at, this is where my organizational brain comes into, is like if I'm doing something I've never done before, document it as you go so that you don't have to try to remember the next time, oh, how did I do this again? Actually, I'm trying to do the SSL certificate on my website. It needs to be updated and it's a nightmare. And last year I saved the process. So this year it will not be a nightmare for me to go through and figure out how did I do this last year. So I always encourage
Smart.
people, especially in business, if there's something you only do quarterly or once a year, like in the business, my first year, when I had to get the tax stuff ready for the accountant, I had no clue what I was doing, what he needed. And so I created a checklist that first year and I've used it every year ever since. And so I don't even have to think about it. I'm like, oh, tax time, let me pull out my checklist. These are the 10 things he needs. If he asks for anything else, I'll send it later. But it just kind of makes it easy to not overload your brain, especially like you said, when you're wearing all these hats, you can't
Mhm.
remember everything. Um, so having a system to not have to remember and to just be able to go look it up when you're ready has
Right.
served me well for sure in juggling all the different roles and responsibilities.
Speaking of juggling, how did you juggle the parent hat, single parent hat, not just parent, but a single parent hat with your work hat? And you said
So
you were working for the Sixers when you had your daughter, right?
yeah, and we were still married at that time. So she was 3 when my ex and I split up. So I had at that point been working in the family business for a couple years. I teased that she was born in October and I retired at the end of the season in June.
What did you do for the Sixers, by the way? I'm just curious.
So first season I was the assistant to the director of game operations. So everything that happened on the court other than the actual game, the national anthem, the halftime show, the dancers, all that stuff, she was in charge of all that. So it was really fun. Definitely a bucket list moment because it was the year we went to the finals against LA and I was literally in the building on the floor in the
Nice.
tunnel watching the whole thing. So that was really cool. And then I moved upstairs and did customer service. So we handled all of the season ticket holders. So if you had season tickets and you needed something, there were 5 of us and we each had anywhere between 5 and 800 accounts we were responsible for.
Mhm.
But you had to be at the game until the end of halftime, every home game.
Okay.
So it was a late night, usually 10:30. And then if there was a game on the weekend, you had to be there
Yeah.
on the weekend. So it didn't really go well with having a newborn. And I lived probably 45 minutes to an hour from the stadium at the time,
Okay.
depending on traffic. So it was quite a commute. But
Yeah.
like I said, my mom was a preschool teacher for 30 years. She retired in 1999 and she started bugging us about grandkids. I'm like, I'm third in line. Why are you looking at me? But I actually got married first. And so my daughter is her birthday present. So they're actually one day apart. So
Oh, that's
their
awesome.
birthdays are coming up this month. So my daughter's the 30th and my mom's Halloween. Um, so she's literally had her from the day I went back to work until she started school. She never went to daycare, which was a true blessing. And
Nice.
then we put her in preschool at 2 because she was that busy little kid that needed to be somewhere and
Yeah.
with some other little people and use up that
Mhm.
energy.
Mhm.
But I think working in a family business made it much easier to juggle as opposed to, if you're at a 9 to 5, sometimes in corporate America, there's not quite as much flexibility. I
Yeah.
will say though, there were definitely nights where I worked late because she was with my mother,
Mhm.
as opposed to had it been the other way around, I would have had to leave at 5 o'clock to pick her up because, the daycare closes and you don't want your kid sitting
Yeah.
on the curb or getting that phone
Exactly.
call.
Or
Yeah,
get, you have to pay extra, and yeah,
right.
yeah, it's a blessing to have that. And it's funny because I lived right outside of Philly and I worked in Philly for a
Okay.
few years. I worked at the American Red Cross.
Okay.
So I'm familiar with Philly, and it's a huge sports town.
Yeah, we're
So
in the middle of it right now with these dumb
yes,
Phillies. So
yeah.
we'll see what happens tonight. Yeah, but I think I tease that working in the family business was a whole lot more responsibility. Because,
Mm,
like I said, when I was with the Sixers, there were 5 of us that did what I did. If you were
yeah.
sick, somebody could pick up the slack pretty easily. Um, but there wasn't that same level of flexibility. So, it's a matter of kind of figuring out what works best for you,
Hmm.
given
How
the
did you juggle that? Let's say, okay, so you're the manager, you're in the office and you're
right.
sick. What did you work from home, or what did you do? If who took that plate, who took your place in the days that you were sick and just couldn't go in?
So, it's a good question. Then it's horrible to say this, but like if I was sick and it was a payroll day, it didn't matter how sick I was. Like I had to pull myself together enough to
Okay.
get to
Yeah.
the office and do what I need to do now. And actually, it's interesting because with the pandemic, I feel like now that we're on the other side of it, there are a lot of little, like I call them the pandemic blessings
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
remote work ability. So over the years, I've made it possible for being able to log into stuff from anywhere, so anything that I can
Mhm.
have access to when like now I can work from home still part of my day because it's really quiet and I can focus and get things done. And then I go to the office for part of my day. It's funny, I just had a flashback. So a couple years in, we went to a conference in San Diego, left the crack of dawn on the red, like there used to be a 7 a.m. flight. And so the minute we land, I turn my phone back on and I've got like a million messages and a guy fell off a ladder while I was in flight.
Oh
To
dear.
San Diego with my dad, and I'm the HR person. And so it was this whole thing of like, all right, now we go through the protocol. He went to the hospital. Thankfully, he was okay, no major injuries, but then you got to go through the insurance company and get all that stuff
Yeah.
up. So when I came home, that's the other thing too, with like the systems and processes in me. I wrote up the process for if somebody gets hurt, this is what you do if I'm not here. And
Beautiful.
everybody got a copy of it. So I think a lot of the things I'm at the point now where if I'm the only one that can do it,
Mhm.
fine. If not, there's a process that you can look up and you can handle it if I'm not around. So we've gotten to the point where there are only a few things that only I can do at this point. And I can do payroll from anywhere now. Actually, I had to do payroll from Greece when I was on vacation one year, which was very stressful because I'm like, the internet wasn't really good. It took me
Mhm.
probably 45 minutes and I'm like, this thing kicks me out. I'm going to scream. And I had to keep in mind the time difference. And
Yeah.
so the payroll is the one thing that no one else has access to right now. But other than that, like I said, there's a system, there's a process, there's a procedure that you can refer to, where there's somebody you can reach out to and call. Like everybody has a list. Here's our IT guy. This is the phone people. This is, the insurance guy if you need him. So I think it's a good point is that you shouldn't be the only one that can do certain things because it gets to
Exactly.
be
And my mind is spinning because I have been talking to my husband about this exact thing of having, he gets
procedures,
frustrated if people don't, he has to remind people over and over and over again. I'm like, have you written a book? Is there anything written down of
right?
what they need to do? Because you can't rely on people to have it in their brain. So
And
as
they're
you're talking, I'm thinking, oh my God, you need to work with my husband.
yeah, and I tease that we all have it in our head, and as the owner, you know all of that. And one of the most painful things I ever did was create our office procedures manual. It was like, but I've used it for 15 years, and it's
Yeah.
like saved so much time when you have a new
Yes,
office
and
admins usually tend to be the
exactly. It's
yeah, the
gonna be more work up front, but it's gonna save you more in the back
yeah,
end because all you need to do is say, okay, you're not sure, look, and that's what
look
I
it up. Yeah.
Oh my God, the number of times I've told them, have you written that down yet? Did you write that procedure down yet? Because I
So
think
I,
the same way. I think
yeah,
you're like my people
there you go.
because I think the same exact way. I want to have something that I can look at and say, okay, this is what I need to do, or give it to someone and say, here you go, this is what you need to do.
Yeah, and if you have a question, come back and ask me. But so I
Right.
did that one summer with a really, really good. We used to hire help in the summer when we were really busy. So we had a young woman who's in St. Joe's, had a great brain. And so I did it with her that year and had her test them all out to make sure they worked. But I
Yeah.
tease now in my consulting work with clients. I said, I got good news and I got bad news. You only have to do it once.
Hmm.
So like you said, it takes time in the beginning, but what it saves you in terms of time and headache later down the road,
And
it's like,
frustration and
yeah,
and
yep,
money because they're messing up. And
yep.
yeah, I'm
So
gonna, after this conversation, I'm gonna have to talk with him again.
there you go. I'm a huge fan of checklists, and I feel like checklists get a bad rap because they're like, what do I need a checklist for? But the checklist actually, because I think the other thing that people struggle with for sure in self-owned small businesses and is delegation. Like, I'm afraid if I give this to somebody, they're not going to do it right. If you
Yes.
give them a checklist, the chances of them getting it right have just gone up astronomically, and you've eliminated the stress because you made sure everything was on the checklist. You reviewed
Mhm.
it and they know what's on the checklist. And if they have a question, they can still come back and ask you, but it's not like calling every 5 minutes. Okay, I did this. Now what's next? It's
No, it's
all
good.
there and it's
Exactly.
outlined.
Yeah.
So
I'm a
yeah,
former teacher, 17 years middle school, so science teacher. So checklists for their anything that they submitted,
right.
sure you check and make sure everything is included.
Yeah.
So,
I
oh
know
my,
my daughter just complained because she did an assignment and the teacher told her, don't go to the old handout, use this one. And then when she turned it in, she's like, oh no, you were supposed to turn that other page. And she's like, you can't post two different sets of parameters for one assignment and then tell me that I screwed up because I skipped one. So like one checklist, please.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's definitely, I think going back to like all the hats, it took me a long time to discover that not everybody's brain works like mine. So for me,
Mm-hmm.
everything's a puzzle. And they actually joke in when we used to go on family vacations, it got to the point where everybody knew, do not put your luggage in the car, put it next to the back of the car. And so I was going to pack because I would figure out how to pack the luggage so that it wasn't all wonky and like you could still see out of the back of the window
Yeah.
if it wasn't going to be stacked to the roof. So that's just how my brain works. It took me a long time to realize that. But I think, again, like you said, when you're wearing a million hats, you have to have systems and processes and kind of a routine. Otherwise, you miss something and, you're juggling and you're definitely going to drop a ball.
Yeah, and for some, thinking like that can be stifling, like you're stifling my creativity. But in some ways, it just is easier. Like loading the car. All right, you
Right.
want to be creative, go ahead and do it, but then let's see what happens as a result. So go ahead, creatively
Yeah.
put that
When
luggage in
somebody gets
there.
hit with a suitcase in the back of the head because they didn't
Exactly.
load it in right.
Oh
The other
God.
thing, too, though, I tell people all the time when I'm working with clients is when you are delegating something, explain why, like why I want you to do it this way. But then also say, hey, and if you have a suggestion or if there's, another alternative, once you've done it a couple times, come tell me and maybe we can tweak it and, get to a better point. So I think, like I said, you give them some parameters, but then give them a little bit of ownership and let them kind of work through it. So a fresh set of eyes sometimes also can give you an idea that you would have never thought of because you've been doing it
Absolutely.
the same way forever. So I think it's all about a little bit of give and take.
Are there any hats you're looking to put on that you haven't done? Like, oh, I kind of want to try this.
That's a good question. I think the author was like the next big thing for me.
Yeah, we didn't talk
Um,
about that. Talk to me about
yeah,
that.
so I'm
How did you
excited
start
about that.
that?
So I've been writing for a very long time, and I actually studied the craft of writing for children for about a decade. I took a course here locally, and then the woman who ran it took a small group of us and we kind of kept going with her. And I was one of the original ladies in the group. It was all women. We met on Monday morning. And, she was a nonfiction author
Okay.
who'd wrote some really great books on actually one you'll probably like on the invention of the X-ray and, the whole chemist who lost his head, I think was the name of the other one. They're a little bit tough to find nowadays, I think, though, which was about the periodic table of the elements and how that was created. So I worked with her for a decade, and always thought children's writing was going to be, so that's still a hat that I haven't put on officially yet because I haven't published a children's book, but I've always written, and she's always encouraged me to tell my story. So growing up mixed, number one, my mom's Black, my dad is white, and that was kind of a bit of an experience. And then also, like I said, this only girl in a male dominated world. So this was the one that kind of came to me to finish first, which was interesting because I didn't think it would be the first book I wrote and published. I actually have a business book in the works and kind of outline to go with the consulting work. I have the outline for the book about growing up mixed in kind of middle class America and what that was like for me. But this one kind of came to me probably about 18 months ago to just finish. And so I did, and it will hopefully by the end of this month, or what is it, October now, the link will be up to purchase it. So it kind of is the book. It's all about leadership for women. And it's a book that I wish I had in my 20s and 30s, now that I'm in my 40s. And kind of my daughter inspired me to kind of write it and finish it to hopefully help that next and younger generation step up sooner, you know, take up space. And kind of, unfortunately, we still live in kind of a male-driven world, I think, with regards to almost everything. It's funny, I saw a clip, I think on LinkedIn the other day, with Meryl Streep and a bunch of other actors. I think Tom Hanks was sitting up there, or a bunch of other male actors up there. And she was teasing how, as women, we learn to speak men just like we learn to speak English because it's everywhere, but men never learn to speak women,
Yeah.
or very few of them do. So this is all about taking being a woman in a male-dominated industry and using it to my advantage and not having it be a disadvantage. So kind of all the lessons I've learned over the years with regards to, I kind of look back over my life. So it starts when I'm 4, and the mom put me in gymnastics, and I had 2 things going for me. I was tiny and I was fearless. So like those were like, that's what you needed if you were going to be a gymnast. You need to be as little as possible and no fear. So that's the first lesson, is to be fearless. And I think we lose that as we get older, you know, for a whole array of reasons. And so it's 22 lessons of me kind of reflecting back over my life and my different careers and things I've learned along the way that I think could be helpful to. It's not really just geared toward young women. It's for women on the rise, because I think we're all continuing to evolve and grow. So any age or stage, but the initial thought was like, this is for my daughter. So she may still learn some lessons the hard way, because kids have a habit of doing that.
And that's important, not for nothing. That's really important to not take away their lessons,
Right.
because that's
But
how
some
we
of them you
learn.
really don't have to learn. Like I can tell you for sure, like you really don't need to go that way.
But if
But
she
you know,
chooses,
yeah.
it sounds like a
So
really important book. Really
yeah,
important.
and that
I love
was
that you're sharing not only this book, but that you're working as a consultant, and sharing your organized brain and how that can help a business. Not that everyone needs to be like you, but to just take, some of what you know to have worked and try to implement it and see how it goes, because some people do find it very stifling to think very linearly and logically. But with a business, you kind of have to.
So the thing that's interesting too in my consulting business is called the full circle business, and it's all based off of a circle, which is about the customer experience. So having all the systems and process in place behind the scenes to make sure your customer has a fabulous experience. And I tease that it's not linear, it's a circle and it's all connected. So like people think A to Z, like, and we're done. No, it's a circle. And when you get to the
Up
end,
and
you're just
down, and
starting over again.
Mhm.
Especially in the trades, if you're seasonal and you're cyclical. So like our
Mhm.
years, and I tease like I created the budget with my, like I said, now friend who's our financial consultant a million years ago. And every year we just kind of roll it over, make a copy and tweak it. We don't ever start from scratch again. So that's my goal with the consulting and helping people, is we're going to do it once together, and then you never have to do this from scratch ever again. But it's interesting. And I think for me, the book was also kind of a good reminder. When I first started didn't have any intention really of starting a consulting business. And I had, a lot of people were like, no, you have to share that with the rest of us. You can't keep that to yourself. Because
Yeah.
part of me was like, who am I to tell somebody else how to run their business? And then I realized
If
that,
they ask.
oh, right. If you have
Yeah.
the knowledge and the ability
Yeah.
to be helpful, then you kind of owe it to the world to share that with those that
Make money
just
off
aren't
of it because it's
wired
part of
that
what
way.
you've learned. Yeah, I love that you're doing it. How can people get a hold of you if they want your help?
So I'm on all the platforms, and so you can either look me up personally, which is under Suhaiba Neill, or my business is called The Full Circle Business, and it's thefullcirclebusiness.net. And the
Okay.
book, all of that will be on my website for now. I'm not building a whole new site for that at this moment. That's too much
Oh,
trouble.
one
So
one
there
stop
is,
shopping. My
yeah,
website is one stop shopping. The educational
yeah.
consultant, the coaching, everything's one place. Perfect.
So it's not turned on yet. I'll turn it on probably at the end of the week. There's a dedicated page on my website just for the book. And it
Good.
has some additional resources. So what I encourage people to read the book first, because otherwise it may not fully make sense to you.
Hmm?
But yeah, and so LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, where else? Uh, I have a Twitter account, but I don't really use it anymore. We won't get into Twitter today. But yeah, so pretty much, anywhere online where everybody's hanging out. I'm kind of on all the other platforms. So,
Okay,
and the new one
perfect.
is Alignable. I don't know if everybody knows about that one yet.
I've never heard of
Um,
Alignable.
okay, so it's kind of like LinkedIn, but it's not, it's a little bit more, I'd say organic. It's not like business kind of 9 to 5 energy. It's a little more kind of, it's really a networking platform where most of the people I've met so far on there, I've met in a group and then we've talked offline after we've
Okay.
kind of connected in a group. So it was a nice place to, I found, at least for me so far, in with regards to meeting other women who are
Mhm.
in business for themselves. It's a good platform for that, for meeting other women that are entrepreneurs and um, kind of doing their own thing as well. So
Beautiful. I love it. Is there any last words of wisdom that you want to share or
I will say, and this is in the book as well, and my one pre-reader was like, I was waiting for this chapter. When you wear a million hats, you have to remember to take care of yourself and take breaks. So I actually was really bad at that for a minute. And then I kind of noticed my pattern. And so now I schedule my vacation and my days off the same way I schedule my doctor's appointments and my haircuts. Like it goes on the calendar and then you have to honor it. So I think that's the other thing that can be hard sometimes, especially for us as women. If you're a mom and you've got a million things going on, you really still need that downtime and that break. Also for me, as I tease, like I have way too many ideas and with a creative brain I can't always turn it off. It almost feels like being lazy to me to not do anything. And I'm like, I could be being productive right now. And it's like, no, your body needs a
you
break.
need to
Your brain
rest?
needs
Yeah.
a break. You need to just kind of make sure you take that time. So now, and actually it's one of the reasons I cracked and got a puppy. I really did not want a puppy because I've had puppies before. And at 43, I was not in the mood for a puppy, but we did it. But we walk 3 times a day. And I'm
Yeah. It
actually
gets you
way
out.
more productive after my afternoon walk when I come back to my desk than I was before the dog and the walk. So I
Yeah.
plug away. Like I can that person I could sit down and just like be at my desk until it gets dark, and it's not good for you.
No, it's
But
not.
now she knows what time walk time is and has no problem reminding me like, okay, mom, it's walk time, let's go.
That's
And I
beautiful.
get up and I walk her, and then when I come back, it's interesting because I find sometimes when you give your brain that rest, things connect that you weren't thinking
Yeah.
about because you were like so
Exactly.
overloaded and
That's
on.
exactly what I was thinking because when you take that break and you recharge and you're mindful of what's around you instead of what you have to do or what you just did, then you're recharging your brain. It's like rebooting,
Yeah,
and you'll be much more productive afterwards, especially
for
getting
sure.
off the screen. I'm
Yeah.
finding now I'm on the screen so much starting this business that it's crazy. It's crazy the amount of time I spend on the computer.
Yeah.
Uh,
And actually I still, like I said, you guys can't see my bookcase. I still read. and I prefer to read real books whenever I can. So I have a Kindle, and like for travel, it's great, but
Yeah.
almost every other book I read is literally a real book that's in my
Real.
hands of pages
Mm-hmm.
that I can turn.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I think making sure that you figure out what works well for you and like scheduling it and making it a regular part of your routine. And like I said, I think really just remembering to honor that and not override a day off for something. Actually, I was on the call in actually one of the networking groups on Alignable, and a young woman just started her business, and she said, I really don't want to work on Fridays. I said, do me a favor then. I said, put on your calendar, no meetings, put it on every Friday. And that way you won't ever be forced to work on a Friday because you scheduled a meeting. And it's like you can still work on your business behind the scenes, get caught up, but you got to program your brain that no, I said I wasn't working on Friday, and I'm going to honor it. And I think, unfortunately, like I said, we struggle with that a lot as women. And sometimes if you're, the people pleaser or a giver like me and you love to be helpful, like, oh, I could squeeze you in. And it's like, no, you got to honor yourself and what you need to be your best as well.
You're speaking to me right now. Absolutely. This is a really important conversation to have in every single aspect. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having
It
me.
was really, really nice meeting you. And to the listener, thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on The Hats We Wear.